that their percentage of divorce is greater in interracial couples. Now, I think a lot of that could have to do with some of these problems. What about traditions? For example, in Mexico, you have lots of parties, you have these traditions, you have these festivals, but in the States, you don't have that. All right, so that's another thing. Are your traditions matching and the same? What about child raising? How do you view how should children be raised? How should they be disciplined? Sort of goes into the speech I did last time, you know? All of these things play a huge role. Food can also play a role. If you are so used to just a certain kind of food and you are not willing to try other foods, that could be a problem in a marriage. Also, the families involved. And now I'd like to spend a little time on this one because this one can make or break an interracial marriage. Because even if you, as a young person, as you guys saw in the stats, young people are a lot more open to interracial marriages. But even if you are, your parents may not be. And that will cause strife within the family and within the relationship. Now, a good example of that would be if I was involved in an interracial marriage and I believed that Christmas was a time we shouldn't do a lot of, things. It was just, time that we were together as a family, we enjoyed it, we didn't do a lot of presents or anything, right? That's just my culture. That's what I was raised up in, all right? But then I married someone from Mexico, and she believes from her family and background is that Christmas is this party and all these gifts are given and all this huge stuff. Then if I was to go over to that family's house and I may not be as comfortable or may not be accepted because of my different beliefs in that. And then that stems to the beliefs, and that's one of the most important things, and this will make or break a marriage whether you're interracial or not, and that is your belief. Are you equally yoked? Do you both trust in God? Are you both serving God? Are you both Seventh-day Adventists? Those are issues that should be there no matter what, right? And all of these issues, even in marriages between the same race, should be considered as is looked into marriage. Now, I wanted to see if God had anything to say exactly about interracial marriage. And so I'm going to go through a story with you that I hope will help underlie some principles of my belief that interracial marriage is approved by God and why it is approved by God. Leviticus 12 verse 1. And Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Ethiopian woman whom he had married, for he had married an Ethiopian woman. So, Ethiopian woman. When you think of Ethiopian, what do you think of? Black, right? So, people think she has black skin, right? Well, if we look in the Spirit prophecy, we have a little insight. Though called a Cushite woman, the wife, and that's in another version, the wife of Moses was a Midianite, and thus a descendant of Abraham. In personal appearance, she differed from the Hebrews in being of a somewhat darker complexion. Let's stop right there. So she says she was of a darker complexion. So, with that information, we would say Moses was involved in an interracial marriage. Says that she was a Midianite and that she was a descendant of Abraham. I think that should catch our attention. She was a descendant of Abraham, and if you keep reading, it says, though not an Israelite, Zipporah was a worshiper of the true God. So, one of the things that Ellen White says, almost after she says that she was of a different skin, she says, but she was a worshiper of the true God. And she was a descendant of Abraham. So that's the first thing that I would look at for an interracial marriage. Are you both true worshipers of God? Second, it gives us some of her personality traits. She was of a timid, retiring disposition, gentle and affectionate, and greatly distressed at the sight of suffering. It was for this reason that Moses, when on the way to Egypt, had consented to her return to Midian. He desired to spare her the pain of witnessing the judgments that were to fall on Egypt. So this puts her in quite a good light, saying that she was timid, retiring disposition, gentle, affectionate, and greatly distressed with the sight of suffering. But the text that we read, and when we look into the story, we find Miriam was jealous. She was upset, and so she allowed Satan to take control of her, and she attacked Zipporah. Now, one of the big things that people have told me is this is a good reason why interracial marriage should not happen. Because, you see, she was being attacked by Miriam, and that caused problems in the marriage, and that should not happen. And so, because of the family, Moses should have not done that. Now, the question is, would Moses have known what his family would have thought about it? He might not have known that. But Ellen White never once condones Moses or Zipporah. She is always condoning, in this situation, she's always condoning Miriam. Now, there's a little bit more here in the comments of Zipporah. This tells you a little bit more of Zipporah. When Zipporah rejoined her husband in the wilderness, she saw that his burdens were wearing away, his strength, and she made known her fears to Jethro, who suggested measures for his relief. Here was the chief reason for Miriam's antipathy to Zipporah. Smarting under the supposed neglect shown to herself and Aaron, she regarded the wife of Moses as the cause, concluding that her influence had prevented him from taking them into his counsels as he formerly had. So, the main issue here was jealousy on the part of Miriam. So, the main issue. Is the main issue between this color of skin, or is there an underlying issue? I believe that the underlying issue in interracial marriage is cultures and beliefs. And that God does not look down upon interracial marriage, but that interracial marriage should be entered into, just like any marriage should, in a solemn manner, looking at the culture of each individual, the culture of their family, their family's viewpoints, and their belief systems, and how that all works together. Also, we should look at interracial marriage, or any marriage, and see, is our relationship that which will draw us closer to God, draw us closer to between ourselves, the two individuals in the marriage, and will it draw others closer to God? If you don't believe that your interracial marriage is going to bring you and others closer to God, maybe it should not be entered into. But those are questions that should be asked, and is why it leads me to my hypothesis that God does not look down on interracial marriage, but He has given us guidelines for marriage in general.